Good morning, everyone. My name is Estella Banham. I was born in a small town in Mississippi called Wesson. They say it was a Jim Crow state. I didn't know about that until after I had left, where the blacks and the whites were segregated, and the blacks were on one side of town in the uh, one area, and the whites on the other side in another area. Many of the black people worked for the white families, but when they went to the house, everyone had to enter through the back door. No one could go through the front door, which is very different now if we went back. My mother had worked for two families doing laundry and cooking for them. And they loved her and they would help her with her kids, anything we wanted or she needed. There were 13 of us, and I'm the fifth child of 13. And all of my older sisters and brothers, as they got older, left home. We had a small house in the country, and of course, it wouldn't hold all of us if we were there. But being the oldest left there, my older sisters and brothers had left to go elsewhere. My older brother was drafted into the army back then. So every time my mother had a baby, they wanted to name it. Three of my siblings were named from the white families. My father and grandfather both were ministers. They were Baptists, and my mother was AME, Methodist. But later on, my father went to be with my mother in the AME church. But before that, we were all baptized in a little creek in the woods at the age of 12. Somehow they decided that by 12, we were ready to be baptized and become a Christian. So we were baptized, and on Sunday, we would spend the whole day mostly in church. We would go to Sunday school, and after Sunday school, there was church. And after church, we went home for dinner. And all we did was visit with friends and eat dinner. Sunday was considered the Sabbath day. So were not to do any work on Sunday. That was the thinking of the older people there. That's the way they ran things. And they would sometimes have Sunday evening services. So most of Sunday was church, eat dinner, visit with friends. We didn't have electricity or water back then. The water we had, we got from a small well in the woods. We had to go and bring our water home every day. Later on, my grandmother and grandfather had a well drilled, and we used to go over there and get water, which was much closer. My father and grandfather being ministers, we were always watched by the whole community. We were in a small community of friends and relatives, and everyone watched out for each other's kids. And of course, the whole community kept us in line. We were being preachers' kids. They expected us to be good kids. And so we would never uh, do anything wrong. Or the older people would say, if you're bad, you go to hell and be with the devil. So we didn't want that. That sounded awful. We were taught to respect all of the older people. Anybody that was grown up, we were to respect them. And whether we knew them or not, we would speak to everyone, give them a friendly hello. They always call that the friendly Southern atmosphere of all the people. And my father was good at that. He would tip his hat and speak to everyone. After my father went AME, he was assigned churches in other small towns. And I would travel with him to church, which I loved because I liked meeting other people and having friends all over, and we would write letters back and forth. Nowadays, nobody writes letters, it seems. The only sports we had in school was basketball and football. I played basketball all through high school, and we didn't have any gyms, so we played outside, um, well, what we call in just in the not on the lawn, but just in the courtyard. But it was fun. That's all we had. Holidays like Christmas, we weren't able to have any toys, anything. So our Christmas was my aunt. My dad had one sister who was a school teacher, and she would take us kids uptown, they would call it, and they would have a guy on the back of a truck, just like Santa Claus, that would hand out little stockings of candy. And our Christmas was like fruit, peppermint sticks, and nuts, paper, pencil and paper for school. We were always happy to get that because we always needed that. The books we had in school weren't the best. They were hand-me-downs from the white schools. But later on, we got a few better books, and we always had devotion in the morning before school, and and we always had history books, which they don't have today. Like I wish they did, because a lot of kids don't know about history in the past. After I was the oldest one left at home, I had to watch my younger sisters and brothers, and my mother was ill at one time, so I was the main cook. I did everything, the laundry, the cooking, and taking care of the younger kids. So in school, we had a 4-H club group, and we all had to make something to be judged. I got pretty good at making biscuits. We made everything from scratch anyway. So I made biscuits and won a blue ribbon for my biscuits because they were the best. We always had fresh fruit and vegetable. The fruit wasn't a lot of like apples and oranges, but we had like pears, peaches, plums, and we had lots of vegetable all around us because people had big farms and gardens. And the vegetable now that they're saying that's healthy for you is what we grew up on, like the greens and the sweet potatoes and the beans. And we used to go to farms to help gather the vegetable. We picked baskets of green beans, and they would pay us like $3 or so for picking and a bushel. So that's what the little money, that's the way we made our little change. And my grandmother was always telling us about save your pennies. So she made banks from pet milk cans, put a top in a pet milk can because they used canned milk a lot back then. And we would save our pennies, drop our nickels and pennies in the can. And of course, when we got a few, we wanted to go back and get them and buy something. so, uh, so we would help her on the farm. They had cows, pigs, chickens. So we had fresh milk, fresh butter, and eggs. And we used to help my grandmother make the butter. And that was fun. I could never master handling the milk and the cow. I could never get the grip of that. So, but anyway, uh, they had pigs too. So in the fall, the men would butcher a pig. So we had smoked ham and sausage for the winter, and and everyone shared their food, with the people that didn't have much. My last year in high school, I went to a boarding school um, in a little town called Prentice, Mississippi. I stayed in a dorm there for 1 year, and that was fun because we still could play basketball, and we had a team and to travel. And I was always a very shy girl. And even into my teens, I was always very shy, but I always liked to have friends. And my aunt used to do the Bible school, the vacation Bible school, I would say, after in the summer. And she uh, was never married. She was a school teacher, but never married. But she devoted her time to all the little kids. She would go around and pick up kids and have a speaking group or a singing group. And she tried very hard to get me to sing, and I just wouldn't do it back then. I might have been about 5 or 6. But afterward, I joined the school choir, and we had little homemade uniforms. That was neat. Most of our stuff was homemade anyway. We had people in the community that sewed real well and made little dresses and blouses for us. So after joining the school choir, I liked to sing, and so I've been singing ever since. Everywhere we went, we were singing. But one family friend had this huge sugarcane field, and we would go and watch him make syrup from the sugarcane. He had the horses that went around and to operate the machine. And that was fun to watch. And afterward, we would either buy or either his wife would sneak a can of syrup to us. And it was good cane syrup at that time. So we were used to seeing sugarcane fields and cotton fields. They didn't have too many big cotton fields around where I was, but one farmer had a small one, and they were relatives. So my cousin tried to get me to come and help pick some cotton. So I had a little sack and tried to pick cotton. I never could pick cotton to figure it out. But anyway, it took me a whole week to fill up just a little tiny sack of cotton. So, but anyway, that they finally gave that up as they got older. And I used to like to visit with the older people. So I would go to the old people's house and talk to them. And they would tell us stories, and they would tell us jokes. And but they all were really nice to us. So, and they would, strictly keep us in line too. I moved to Minnesota after high school to be with my older sisters and brothers who had gone a few years before. My dad had one brother who worked for the railroad, and he settled in St. Paul. So my brothers and my sister's husbands were all in the army. And after they got out, my uncle wanted them to come to St. Paul to find jobs. So one by one, all the older kids left and was there. By the time I graduated from high school, I went to join them. And I started to work downtown St. Paul. So I would catch the streetcar or the bus on University and ride down every day. Um, I got used to doing that, and I soon got used to the snow and the cold. So after moving away, I would try to come back. That was my first time of riding the train too. And I would come back to visit once in a while, not very often. And things got very different. A lot of the older people had passed away. And my mother wasn't very well. But I always liked to go back to see what the old high school looked like. It was a brick building, so it was still standing. So later on, they made it into a community center. But anyway, after I left, I was about, 15, and moved to St. Paul. I joined Pilgrim Baptist Church there. Uh, and I started to work at a small store downtown St. Paul. And in St. Paul, that's where I met my husband, David. We lived My uncle lived right back of their house. So we became friends. And shortly afterward, he was drafted into the Army. And he and one of my brothers, they didn't want the Army, so they went down and changed and went into the Air Force, which he liked better because he wanted to go to school again. And later on, after about 4 years, he signed up for pilot training. So after he was accepted into the pilot training, he went through and ran into some difficult times there with people. Back then in the 50s, they didn't have many Black pilots. So he realized that right away, that they were prejudiced. Some didn't want him to go through. They didn't think the Blacks uh, deserved anything. And like they're saying now that Black Lives Matter, I can understand why. Back then, they didn't think Black Lives mattered. They only thought Blacks were supposed to do certain things and not have anything, a decent job, a decent home to live in. Today, it's a lot better in that respect. But anyway, he went on through pilot training, and some wanted to see him finish and some didn't. But thank God, some people were on his side and they could see that he was doing right. At the end, when he was doing his solo flight, um, his supervisor sent one guy up with him to see what he was doing, see that he was doing it right. And so he said when he came down, this guy didn't like anything he did, nothing. And so his supervisor said, I don't believe that. So he sent another guy up with him. And this guy came back and said everything was perfect. All he had to do was just look around in the air. He loved flying, so he flew in the Vietnamese War and the B-52 bombers. So he was flying out of Guam and Thailand and Vietnam. They were flying over, dropping bombs on the enemies. He said he could see them fly. Um, they were shooting from the ground, trying to shoot them down. They could see the fire, but they were too high and couldn't reach them, thank goodness. But they did get a few later on. But by the grace of God, he was lucky enough to come back home. So he was in for just 20 years of time in the Air Force. Then he retired. And we moved back home to Minnesota. Later, he went to work for FAA. And that's where he was until he retired. Minnesota was where he was born, Minneapolis, he and his siblings. And so we always ended up coming back home. My husband had come back when he knew he was getting out to find a place to move to back home. So his mother had a sister that lived in Burnsville, and her kids went to school there. She had two. And she helped him look around to find a house. And we looked in an area, they were just building new houses all around there. And we looked in an area where they were building new houses and found this one not too far from the school. The kids could walk to school. And it was going to be ready by the time he got out so we could move in. So I didn't see it until after we had moved. But it worked out good. The neighborhood was good. And some of the neighbors we still keep in touch with. Many years. We were there in that area for 36 years. So I'm just thinking what else I you would like to know about growing up in a Jim Crow state. Looking around now, I think it was better then than it is now, really. I thought we were going forward, and it seems like we're going backwards. They're trying to uh, keep the Black people from owning anything, having anything nice. And so, as if, like the signs were saying, Black Lives Matter, which they do, they have a lot of smart people, a lot of nice people of color, and that are worth moving up and helping out. I didn't know about, I was in the 60s when I learned about, when we heard about the Martin Luther King marches. So we would watch it. I was not there at the time. We would watch it on TV and we heard all about it. And now when they show pictures, it's hard to believe. The same thing is almost happening here with the riots. I don't like destroying property of anybody and fighting. And I was never a fighter in school. So when the kids used to try to pick on me, my friend would step in and take over. So, but anyway, I wonder when I look around now, why? Don't know who's responsible for it, but a lot of people could be. I didn't expect to see this happening in this day. Instead of going forward, we seem to be, some of them are trying to pull us backwards. Looking at the history movies about slavery and back how they treated the Black people. Some of that was going on when my parents were living at the time down there. My mother had one sister, and they took advantage of her. And of course, nothing was ever done about it because there they knew the whites would get away with anything. Just let a white person say a Black person did it, and they believed it. They didn't have any, we had no police protection for the Blacks there at the time. But now they do have a few Black policemen. It has changed. We were just a few miles from Jackson, Mississippi, which is the capital of Mississippi. And that's where Malcolm X was. You might have heard about him. And we watched the Martin Luther King marches, and a lot of the people, we didn't have anybody from our town join in at the time, I don't think. Of course, like I wasn't there, but I would just watch like everybody else to see what was going on TV. And we would have celebrations through church and speak of his life. He was a brave, smart man. And the whites didn't like to see anybody try to do good for the Blacks. And he was trying to do good and march toward a peaceful world, to try to get people to come together in a peaceful way. Of course, the whites didn't like that. The same thing happened to John F. Kennedy and his brother, Malcolm X. Everybody that tried to do something to improve the world and bring people together and learn to live together and work together. There were a few out there that didn't like it, and there still is. But went on TV this past few weeks, a few days, I would say, it's hard, it's sad to look at, and I don't understand the leaders that we have today, how they could allow that. In a way, I understand. I can see, but then I think how sad it is. But thinking of the future of our young people, I would like to see the world settle down and get better so they could grow up. They are our future. And for them to grow up to be our leaders and make this a better world for all of us. I always think about the song, Oh God, see, I don't know if I can get through this without crying. I love the words of the song that said, Oh God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter in the stormy blast, and our eternal home. I have a little prayer book that I have by my bed that I read from every day. A prayer for hope, a prayer for strength. And I pray for a better world for our young people. I admire the young people who understand and trying to do something. They really get the picture a lot better than the older people. And I admire what they're doing. I pray that this vaccine will help turn the virus around and get rid of a lot of it, get rid of all of it, really, so we can have a better future for our young people. Precious Lord was one of Martin Luther King's favorite songs, and we usually do that during his celebration once a year. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. Lord, I'm tired, I am weak, I'm worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. When my work is all done, on my race here is run. Let me see by the light thou hast shown the fair city so bright. When the lantern is the light, take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. When my way grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my light is almost gone, hear my cry, Lord, hear my call. Hold my hand, Lord, lest I